This episode is proudly supported by the new Capital Food Market Canberra, where you can explore the very best producers, artisans, fresh food providores and hospitality venues of the region. Here is Krista Potter from Deli Cravings.
It's going to be a beautiful marketplace. It's going to be busy, it's going to be vibrant, it's going to have choice. It's all under one roof, so the weather's not going to be a problem. Yeah, just can't wait to see the community all back.
For more information, go to capitalfoodmarket.com.au or visit the markets and feed your curiosity.
I'd like to acknowledge Australia's First Nation people as the traditional custodians of the land, and for this episode in particular, the Gurna people. I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging.
He's like, we're going to make a Cabernet one day. I'm like, no, we're not. We're never going to do it. And he's like, no, we are. And I'm like, no, Charlie, we're not going to do it. And then I think it was halfway through vintage in 2022. And he's like, guess what? We're picking Cabernet in 2 weeks. And I'm like, excuse me?
This is Over a Glass. I'm Shanteh Wale.
Skye Salter is one half of the duo that brings us Paralian Wines. Some would say the better half. She and her partner in crime, Charlie Seppelt, launched their small band in Willunga McLaren Vale in 2018. It was after a staggering 46 vintages between them, making wine for other people in other places, that led them there. Hi Skye, thanks for joining me.
Hi, thank you for having me on your podcast.
It's a pleasure. I've been wanting to have you on for some time. I was just wondering if Charlie would let you, but he offered you up very freely.
Yes, he does try to push me outside of my comfort zone often.
What a cheeky bugger. Now, how are you and how is the beautiful Ginny?
Ginny is good. So she's our dog. For anyone listening, she's beautiful. She's old. She's completely deaf at the moment. And we've just given in and finally got her a doggy door, which according to her only works one way. So it goes out, but then she can't get back inside.
Oh, no. They are good, those doggy doors, but yeah, a little bit of training is required. For everyone listening, Ginny is the most beautiful duck collar retriever. And if anyone hasn't looked up those dogs, you should, because I have to say they are probably the prettiest dogs on the planet. But she still looks like a puppy. I had no idea she was getting on in age.
Yeah, she does. She's got a really, really youthful face and she still plays like a puppy. But yeah, she's an old girl, 11 and a half now, I think. So, yeah.
So beautiful. Now, Skye, I want to hear a little bit about you before we get to all the wonderful wines you make and the things that you do. Tell me a little bit about kind of where you grew up and what your kind of childhood was like.
So I grew up in a little country town on the Eyre Peninsula in South Australia, a little town called Ceduna. So beautiful little country town, about 2,000 people, I think is the population. Everyone knew everyone. Dad started off there as a local dentist and Mum was a receptionist in the local doctor's surgery. So they literally knew the whole town. But yeah, my childhood was filled with going to the beach, fishing, country sports, which were very fierce, and I'm not super athletic or fierce, so I didn't do so well. But yeah, it was a great place to grow up. No wine around there. It's a lot of like wheat farming and I think gypsum and things like that. Salt as well, but yeah.
I actually find that a lot of people that gravitate towards wine often come from areas where kind of farming and that outdoor lifestyle is quite prevalent. And I think that it's probably a good thing because it teaches you that kind of, you know, to be successful in lots of industries, it takes quite a lot of hard work.
Yeah, definitely when I was looking at what I wanted to do for like a career, I didn't see myself sitting in an office all day or anything like that. And yeah, I think a big part of why I'm in McLaren Vale is that closeness to the ocean as well. I really struggle to be away from like a seaside location. Charlie's always dreamt of buying a property maybe in Eden Valley or something. I'm like, no, that's too inland for me. I can't do it. And he's like, oh, okay, fair enough. Yeah.
I think there's two types of people. Ones that like need big open country and some of us, like myself and you, that need to be near the coastline. Like I feel claustrophobic if I can't see the coast, and I totally understand. And there's only a few places in Australia, luckily a few, that you can make great wine and have that beach lifestyle. So you've nailed it in one. Tell me a little bit about when you decided to study wine. What flicked that switch? How come you chose that form of study?
Sort of, I guess I had a real interest in chemistry at school, and then also loved art. And I guess you kind of get that really nice balance of science and creativity with winemaking. But my whole sort of interest in wine and wineries themselves actually came about, I think it might have been in year 7, and we went over on a school trip to the Grampians, and they actually took us to Seppelt's Great Western Winery to do a tour there. And just the history behind it, it just felt so magical, and there's a lot of beautiful stories that came out through the tour. We did a cordial tasting at the end. Obviously, we were underage, but it just felt really cool, like that people were, I guess, creating something that I guess is a way to record time and place in a bottle, and I think that really resonated with me. It's a really nice thing that I guess wanted to be a part of.
That's great that they, like it in school ages, they're taking you out and showing you kind of the world and professions, because it can be really impressionable, at such a young age. Now, you went to the University of Adelaide and studied oenology there. I believe Charlie, was he a year below or ahead of you at that stage?
Yeah, he was a year above. I didn't know him at university, but I did meet him once in a tasting, because I think he might have been a teacher's pet. So he was pouring wines for one of our tutorials in one of my classes. So
I bet he was the teacher's pet. That makes so much sense. So what was your first impression? What was your impression of him when you met him that first time?
Well, I didn't really pay too much attention, but when I met him again, when we were working together a few years later at Hardy's, I don't know, he was very serious, and he took his job very seriously. And I think, I think I really respected that. But it found, Adelaide's very small, and we both did high school in Adelaide, so we found a bit of a connection in sort of the people that we knew. And it actually turned out that his one of his good friends from school was the older brother of my best friend, but we didn't know each other through that connection yet either. So
I always find those kind of first impressions, or that, it's always fascinating to hear, obviously that changed over time, and you got to know each other when you worked at Hardy's Tintara. Tell me a little bit about kind of your first posting out of university.
So we had to do vintage experience in our final year of university, and I think at that point in uni, I was very interested in what we were learning, but because it was so study-based and sort of indoorsy, I was like, I don't know if this is for me. And then I did my vintage experience. I was getting my hands dirty. It sort of, everything kind of clicked. It felt like where I should be, because it was back to doing physical hands-on work and less, less desk work. I really loved it, and it sort of cemented that was where I was supposed to be, because I did question it just based on the study, whether, it was the path I should be on. But vintage was great. It's a really exciting time of the year, and just a fun time.
I suppose they need to see that you can stick it out in uni. I think that's often part of the plan with all the lectures, and that is just kind of sticking through something, which can be really difficult. So I'm glad that you persisted with it, because I don't know, I studied dance, and I still had to go to 3-hour lectures, and I just fell asleep at all of them. I just could not be interested, and I just go straight to sleep. Now, you had some amazing experiences doing vintage all over the world. We won't cover off all the 20 plus that you must have done, but I want to know a little bit about, in terms of what your experience was in Australia. Shaw and Smith, Wirra Wirra, you both went back to Tintara at some point as well. So that call must have been interesting. What was kind of your impressions of Australian winemaking? And then when you went overseas, how did that change?
I think, I guess in Australia, we are really, really lucky with the resources we've got in terms of fruit, but also our winery equipment is very, very good. The biggest divide I saw working overseas, especially in the south of France, very old equipment, old wineries, really hands-on, whereas Australia's quite modern. So a lot of the work you don't have to be as, I guess, physically built to do. And I'm quite small, so obviously Australian vintages felt easier for me on my body. I remember working in the south of France, and even the hoses were thick rubber hoses, not these sort of lighter ones we use here, and just dragging them around all day. I'd get in my bed at night time and try to fall asleep, but I couldn't because my body was so sore. It was crazy. And I think what I learned overseas, I think, because I was working at really small estates that had all their own vineyards, just that connection to their own vineyards and place. And you do see that in Australia, but we're probably sourcing from grower fruit much more as well. But it was all really good experience. I love everything I've learnt from it. Working in Burgundy was a very different experience. We weren't really paid to do the work. It was more you go out picking in the morning, then you'd sit down for a 3-course lunch, then you'd process the fruit in the afternoon and sit down for a 3-course dinner, and then you'd rock, paper, scissors to see who would go and clean up the winery after dinner. So very, very different to working 12-hour shifts in a big Australian winery.
When you said you weren't really paid, my first reaction is kind of shock horror, but then with your explanation of that, I was like, okay, I can kind of paid in food or wine doesn't sound too bad, especially when you're in Burgundy.
Yeah, it was really good, except we drank house wine from a little winery down the road, and it was the group that we were working with. It was all Aussies and Kiwis, and they just get this keg of Aligote from down the road for us to drink as house wine. And the winemaker that we got it from was horrified that we came back to get more during the one season. He's like, I've never seen people drink this much before. You guys are crazy. What's going on? It's like, fun group of people. And I think
Aussies and New Zealanders, what do you expect?
Yeah, exactly. He should totally expect it. But everyone got really bad reflux as well because of the acid. So, too much acid and too much cheese.
The hard things you have to deal with during vintage. I love it. Do you think that there was a place that you worked in particular that helped shape you as a winemaker?
I'd have to say definitely Hardy's, because there is a really beautiful long history there in terms of Australian wine. I think the winemaking they do there is at a really top tier sort of level in terms of quality and just having that control. And I think when you do work in these big places that are so controlled in what they do, they're those lessons that you learn and take away and apply on a smaller scale to what you do. It's just those 1%ers, if that makes sense. Those little details that you might not learn in a smaller place that's been, doing something with limited capacity. Whereas Tintara's got all the resources that a winery could have. So I guess you see that other level and just how far you can take things and what's necessary, say in a bad season and things like that.
I suppose that, like anything, when you kind of start to see methodology and systems put in place, like you said, it's important when you, even if it's in a small scale, maybe the winemaker can remember what batch has been put where or whatever, but as things grow and as things become more succinct, you really need to have, like you said, those 1%ers, those practices that are just put in place that makes things easier and makes things more systematic and like you said, so you can control what's happening and not be, completely, coming undone, like you said, in a bad season. So it is good to hear. I mean, and then, like I said, I think it's fantastic that you had experience at such small places and big places because, you can take a little from each of them. And then when you decide to do your own thing, you can apply all those lessons So 2018 came around and you both decided to make a little bit of wine for yourselves. How did Paralian come about?
I guess it was a lot of encouragement from friends and family. We'd always talked about doing it, but it was really scary actually, taking that plunge. We'd been, I guess, you don't doubt yourself, but you want to make sure you launch with a good product, and I guess, yeah, you want to have the confidence that you can do it and be successful. We didn't want to, I guess, start a brand and then have it sort of fade away from neglect or not having any time to do it, or it just not being something that worked. But we just took the plunge in 2018. It sort of started with, there's a couple of vineyards that we'd worked with at other places that we really loved. So it kind of started when we could access that fruit. We were unrelenting, I guess. It was that fruit or nothing, basically, for a couple of the blocks that we wanted to work with. We didn't want to, I guess, just go out there and say, I want to make a Shiraz, so let's get what we can get. It was, I want to work with that vineyard because we see a lot of potential there. It wasn't being made into a single vineyard wine yet, and we wanted to be the ones to, I guess, push that. So, yeah, it was just getting to that point in our careers where we worked really hard for other people and just wanted to put our own spin on things and see what we could do. It was just getting brave enough to do it.
I think I was judging for my first stint ever with Charlie as chair at the Langhorne Creek show, and on the last night he brought the bottles of your first vintage, and I didn't say it at the time because I was trying to be very cool, obviously, but it was so amazing. I couldn't believe that, to be part of like the start of a story and to see a wine that's in bottle, and I could see it meant so much to Charlie that he'd finally done this thing, and it was so cool to kind of see them and be like, holy shit, you made that, you did all of that. Like it was really cool. And to watch the journey as it's unfolded year after year, listing them at Key, every year the wines get more amazing and the story continues. And it means a lot, I think, to people to be involved from that incarnation of hearing about when it was an idea and watching it grow. And Paralian has had such an amazing trajectory. And like I said, they just get stronger year in, year out. But it can't be easy. How do you start? First of all, how did you start working with the growers? Do you just, like you said, see a site, try and find out who's growing the grapes, and then just cold call and say, hey, my name's Skye, what's up?
Yep. Yeah, that's pretty much exactly what we did. And I guess explaining to the growers what we wanted to do with it. And I think the growers that we work with have been really excited to work with us because we're passionate about what we do, and they've got a real kick out of us making wines, and they are single vineyard wines, and we name their vineyard on the back label, so they've been brought along on this journey with us, and so our success is also their success. So I guess, like, if we were a bigger, if we're blending these wines away into a bigger project, I think it would have been harder, but I think because we are making small batch detailed wines, I think the growers were really on board. It was good. A couple of the blocks took a few years to convince the growers, but we got there.
Working with growers, like you said, is massive in Australia, and it's incredibly important. It's also not an easy feat because, you've got people that are there day in, day out. You guys have lots of other things happening as well. What's the one thing you can do to do the right thing by the grower? How do you keep that relationship intact? What's important from your point of view in looking after them?
I think it's just it's the general relationship building. Just be a good person. I mean, there's going to be good and bad seasons. I think being really open and honest about your expectations is a big thing. We try not to be too difficult in terms of picking times, but sometimes you have to pick when you have to pick. But just being a bit flexible with them as well it goes a long way. All of our growers are really, really easy to work with.
And do you decide on like price every vintage? Is it the same vintage in and out depending on how much must? Like, how do you have that conversation?
So usually it's sorted out well before the next season. We've sort of got handshake agreements with a couple of our growers and then a contract with another one. So it's different agreements for different people. And sometimes you can be locked in for a contract for a few years at the same price. Otherwise, it's negotiated annually. Just have these chats with growers and what's happening sort of in the market and quality of fruit. We don't have any issues with quality of fruit. Obviously, they're all doing an excellent job at what they do. So, yeah, it's just up for negotiation every couple of years, I guess.
It's so interesting because that we don't, I think, shine a light on that side of things as much. And I'm always fascinated by it. But like you said, they're all each individual people, so it makes sense to treat them as such. And if somebody, really likes to just have that handshake deal and they don't need or care about signing anything and that's the way they've worked, that flexibility is, a promising skill that you both have. I want to quickly touch on Grenache if you don't mind, because we haven't talked much about Grenache as a varietal, I don't think, on this podcast yet. And I love Grenache, and I, like a lot of sommeliers, have been flogging and talking about Grenache for years, it seems, and only in the last few years have finally people started to pick it up. But tell me a little bit about your experience with Grenache and the journey it's come on in the time that you've been working with it.
Well, I love Grenache too. It's probably my favourite red variety to work with. It's in a really exciting space at the moment in McLaren Vale. Whether you remember or not, I was working for Willunga 100 full-time up until late last year, which is Grenache focused, sourcing Grenache from Blewett Springs and Clarendon as well. So I was working with quite a lot of parcels, and I think the journey that Grenache has taken over the last 10 years has been really exciting. We've taken them from quite big and alcoholic, sort of dense wines into something that's more aromatic. They're really pretty. They've got beautiful acidities and freshness and a lot more focus and purity to them, which is really fun. But for me, Grenache is the most fun to work with, just because it is so. I guess you can pick it early and get a really beautiful result, and you can pick it, late and get a really beautiful result. It's so open to winemaker interpretation of what it can be, which makes it really, really exciting. So we obviously play with a little bit of whole bunch. I think people have started to approach Grenache more in a way that you would make Pinot, like really preserving purity and aromatics, protecting from oxidation during fermentation. So the quality level's really grown, and obviously the price of Grenache fruit has gone through the roof.
And how does it behave in the vineyard? Because it is a hardy variety, isn't it? And it can be trellised, or it can do really well in old bush vines as well. Is it, finicky, or what's it like? How does it behave on site?
It's pretty good. So it's really well conditioned, I guess, for warmer climate. So I guess on these really hot days, I always tell people this is a good way to explain it. When you grow your veggies and your zucchinis get really sad during the hot weather, and tomatoes, and the leaves sort of get quite floppy during the day when it's hot, you'll drive through McLaren Vale and you'll see all the leaves of the vines doing that. But then Grenache is still really quite, upright and happy, and it just copes so well with the warm weather. So in that respect, it's one of the perfect grapes for us to be growing around here. I wouldn't say it's finicky at all. I guess humid weather can be a problem because it does have thin skin, so there's always that botrytis risk. But McLaren Vale is pretty lucky in that we don't tend to have a lot of rain sort of in that crucial sort of ripening period usually. The last couple of years being a little bit of an exception to that. It's quite a vigorous variety as well. I think part of the reason why we're seeing a lot of success in Blewett Springs is because Blewett Springs is sandy soil, so it's low nutrient and low water holding. So that effectively controls the vigour naturally. So you're getting a really, really nice concentration of fruit. And, if you've got a heavily irrigated Grenache vineyard, they just blow up. The bunches blow up like footballs. They're, very, very big and heavy, and you'll get like less colour, less flavour and that sort of thing. So,
well, we don't want that unless we're making some kind of, I don't know, crazy Grenache rosé, but, the fruit there especially.
Grenache rosé is very good.
It is. We don't talk so much about clones in Grenache, but we tend to talk a lot more about soil types. In particular, I love Bleuets Rennes because I think that it kind of stands out when you see Grenache from that area. But do you see Grenache as something that's really kind of transports kind of soils? Is it something that you can see distinctly?
Yeah, I think it is one of those varieties that expresses where it's grown really well. I think a big part of that as well is winemaking. People aren't using a lot of oak and things like that are going to interfere with, I guess, the site flavours that you'll see from where it's grown. But yeah, definitely Bleuet Springs. We always see what we describe as those sandy tannins and just that real purity of fruit and that clarity of flavour. Whereas the Grenache I was working with from Clarendon, it's on sort of more loamy soils, and you would sort of get a few more sort of floral and savoury notes through there rather than these like really bright sort of red raspberry characters that we see in Bleuet Springs. So yeah, it shows site really well.
I remember doing quite a bit of blind tasting in my career, and I love Grenache, and I would always feel really confident picking out a Chateauneuf de Pape because I would put my nose in the glass and I just would fall in love with the aromas, that kind of wild raspberry and Morello cherries. And I just remember thinking like, oh my God, this is so seductive and so beautiful. And that, little bit of prickly heat was like just identifying for me. And I'd be like, oh, this is Grenache 100%. And I'm so excited now because there's such a range of Grenache in Australia. We've kind of come into that place now where there is so many different styles. How does like a consumer going about into a bottle shop buying a bottle of Grenache, how do they work out kind of what they're going to get, whether it's big, dark, like you said, maybe higher alcoholic, jammy, rich numbers, or the light ethereal kind of styles? Because it must be quite confusing. They buy a bottle and then they walk away and go, that's not what I thought I was getting.
Yeah, that is a really good question, and I probably don't have the right answer for it. I think, yeah, a lot of people would expect one thing and get the other. And I don't think there's any real way to, I guess, have that on a label. It's probably more about understanding the producer and their style. So whether a consumer is willing to do a little bit of research before they buy. But a lot of the places that we like that sell our Grenache are these small independent wine stores that, the people that work there know the wines, know their range, and can recommend something to a customer. So I think that's going to be how the customer is going to learn, I guess, what style they want and what producers they should be looking at is, I guess, that hand selling that happens in those really lovely little stores. And also somms in restaurants as well. I think consumers will need to be guided through, the selection.
Absolutely, a bit like we are with Chardonnay these days, and whether it be Sauvignon Blanc or Fumé Blanc or whatever, it doesn't always, like you said, it doesn't always you can't write it necessarily on the label, but people start to know brands. What I like about Paralian when you guys first launched too is that you had, your kind of Bleuet Springs Grenache, and then you had like your Marmont, but then you also had your Shiraz Grenache, which I think really tells a great story about McLaren Vale because it's two varieties that have been blended together for quite some time. And it kind of, I think when you first launched, it walked you through kind of a way to enjoy all the wines in succession or to understand, okay, here's kind of this really crunchy, bright red fruited thing. Here's with a little bit kind of Shiraz stuffing and that medium bodied note. And then you have the density of your Shiraz as well. And I think that that's a really good way to kind of give people perhaps an experience of Grenache, but in a way that's kind of quite easy for them to understand too.
Yeah, for us it was really important to do that blend. Like a Grenache Shiraz for us really speaks of McLaren Vale. It is pretty traditional. Charlie worked at Darrenberg in his early career, and I was at Wirrawira, and they both have these original blends that are Grenache Shiraz. So that's what we were drinking when we were young winemakers. It was sort of those really yummy, juicy wines that had everything, like lovely aromatics, like you were saying, and that lovely density and generosity on the palate from Shiraz. So it was a no-brainer for us to do that, and we still say that is McLaren Vale in a bottle, and it is a really nice way to push people that are probably just Shiraz drinkers sort of into that middle ground and introduce them to Grenache, and then like it's easy to explain to someone when they taste that how it's different to a Shiraz and what the Grenache is adding, and then they take that next step into exploring just straight Grenache.
Perfect. And then they can be diehard fans like us.
Yeah, absolutely.
You are releasing your Springs Hill Cabernet Sauvignon, which I'm thrilled to see. I did think when I met Charlie, good God, how long will it be before he makes a Chardonnay? And of course, within a couple of years, there was your amazing Adelaide Hill Chardonnay offering. And then when I saw that you were releasing a Cabernet, I just went, of course you are, because Charlie likes Cabernet. I adore Cabernet. I don't know, how do you feel about Cabernet?
It's actually the first thing that we've thought about, whether we would make a Cabernet or not. Paralian's been pretty cruisy. We tend to like the same sort of wine styles, but I'm not a huge Cabernet drinker. So this was really Charlie pushing. He's like, we're going to make a Cabernet one day. I'm like, no, we're not. We're never going to do it. And he's like, no, we are. And I'm like, no, Charlie, we're not going to do it. And then I think it was halfway through vintage in 2022. And he's like, guess what? We're picking Cabernet in 2 weeks. And I'm like, excuse me? What? Are you serious? He's like, yep. And I'm like, oh my God, here we go. But it's a really beautiful vineyard, and we're really, really privileged to work with this fruit. It's lovely, lovely fruit, like tiny, tiny little berries. Loads of all the flavors that we love to see in Cabernet. So like those blue fruits, and it doesn't really have that greenness at sort of those lower alcohols that you sometimes see in Cabernet. So Charlie's pretty happy with that too. It's been a really lovely addition to our range. I think Cabernet's still not, like, I don't know when it's going to be back on trend, but I feel like there's a revival coming, and I think the style that we've made, it's not big and chunky, and it's quite elegant, and everything's kind of in the right place, and the acid's really bright. And I think for us, making a wine that you have a glass of and then you want to finish off the rest of the bottle rather than have a glass and go, wow, that was enough for me, is a really big thing. And a lot of the Cabernets that were coming out were just really built up with, I guess, a lot of oak, really extracted, just heavy dry reds. And I think Cabernet can be such an expressive and beautiful variety if it's picked at the right time. So hopefully we've achieved that in the bottle.
I love that. I think I agree with you. There is going to be a revival, and I think it might come back to perhaps people cellaring wine a little bit more than what we are. But I love, and it's very clear, even from some of the words you have on your website, you talk about, delicious drinking and wines that look great on release but can cellar. And I think that that's exactly where we need to be in Australia at the moment, to kind of combat the fact that we've had a lot of big, heavy wines made that, like you said, were over alcoholic, or that took, 30 years in a cellar. Like, who's got 30 years to kind of for that long game? So I think we're in a great spot, but I think we will see that little bit of ebb and flow back to, people are still cellaring their Barolos. They're still kind of, you talk to a winemaker and they've got a few Barolos hidden away and a few kind of Bordeaux. So I think we might see that trend shift again, but I agree with you. Cabernet can be very, very pretty. And if it's not, green and mean and not smoky and oaky, then we've got some really beautiful things to look forward to. So I'm really excited to try your Springs Hill Cabernet, and I'm glad that that's added to the story. And if it falls on its face, you can just blame Charlie. We will all just blame Charlie.
Exactly. You all heard it here. It was his idea.
I love it. Skye, so I can learn a little bit more about your palate. If you only could have 3 drinks for the rest of your life, what would they be and why?
Definitely Chardonnay. Both Charlie and I are huge Chardonnay lovers, and Chardonnay I could drink every day of the week through winter, summer, and just the variety in it is really lovely. I think champagne, I could not go past champagne either, because you need it for celebration, right? Like, it's not a celebration without popping a bottle of champagne or sparkling. I'll have Aussie sparkling too, because some really beautiful varieties out there. And then I think you probably need to have cocktails for holidays. So probably a good mojito or a margarita, I guess. Yeah, something with a lot of lime in it.
Yeah, and it goes with your kind of vibes of being a bit of a beach girl, to have like a delicious, refreshing cocktail and after a bit of time in the sun and the sand. So that's very on trend for you. I like it a lot. Skye, it's been so lovely to chat with you. I hope that we get to drink some Grenache sometime together, and it's always just lovely to hear what you're up to. Congratulations on working on Paralian full-time now. I imagine it is a very busy gig, but it's a beautiful brand, and I wish you the very best with how it goes.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and thank you for all your kind words about Paralian. It's definitely... it's been a journey, and hopefully it's something that is successful in the future. And you'll see more of us, I hope.
Excellent. Sounds good. Cheers to you, Skye.
Thanks.
This is Over a Glass. I'm Shanteh Wale. Stay tuned for more stories from the world of wine and drinks. Listen in every Thursday on your podcast app. Follow us on Instagram @overaglasspod and contact us at overaglass@deepintheweeds.com.au.